Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Space Game Junkie Podcast. I, as always, am your co-host, Brian. And joining me, as always, is your co-host, Jim.
From the roaring 90s.
Were they roaring, or were they kind of thudding?
There's going to be some roaring in a minute here. Hold on.
Oh, boy. Okay. Also joining us is your co-host, Hunter.
You know, sometimes games can give you Tourette's.
Ooh.
And I think...
Ooh!
I think this might be one of them, but I'll explain why. And it's not necessarily bad.
It's not necessarily bad. It's got to be a spicy podcast.
I mean, maybe it's bad.
It's not necessarily bad, but we'll get into it.
It's like moderate cancer. It's not bad.
Jesus Christ. Your co-host, Spaz?
I need to put some...
Desperately seeking space.
If this is going to be brutal like I think it is, I feel like I need to get some salve so I can...
Yeah, I think you want a big bucket of ice water to put whatever in for all the burns you're about to get.
All right.
So friends,
buckle up, boys. We're going in dry.
We have a couple of.
They made it faithful to the original, so I don't have a beef with what they did. I want to talk to the original designer.
The original was actually more difficult. Oh my God, I can't even imagine. So joining us first from my old stomping grounds in Havertown, Pennsylvania. Oh my God, it's a fucking stone's throw from where I used to live. Jeremy Stanton. And joining us from, oh my God, I wrote it down wrong. Cheyenne. I wrote Cayenne, like pepper. Cayenne. Cheyenne, Wyoming. What? I didn't hear that.
I said he's spicy.
Oh, it's a spicy podcast. Just a guy known as Rob. That's all we got is Rob. Hey, Rob. That's all we know.
Rob, no last name.
My name
welcome
is
to the show.
People know me as Tim. Anyway,
well, it sounds. If he says the whole thing, it's so ostentatious. Robert Morgan III.
Oh, really?
You got to get an Esquire on there somehow.
Yep.
Lord of Dunkin'.
Totally fake name.
Lord of Dunkin' Donuts.
I don't know if I want you to live. I don't know if you want me to know where I live after this game.
So, friends, if you're unaware, Ironseed is a game that came out in originally 1994, I believe.
93.
Oh, it's 3.
It was 4.
Yeah, I thought it was 4. By what was it called? Channel 7, I think, was the original company that made it.
Yeah.
And I myself found out about it in the mid-aughts. I'd never heard of it. I don't even know. Was it available in America? Because I don't remember.
Okay, so funny thing. Softdisk released it. Like it was definitely available in the United States, but for whatever reason, I'm not entirely sure how they distributed it. But we ended up getting a huge following in Eastern Europe and Russia. Like we would get fan mail. We got fan mail for years where they were like, "I love Ironseed. It's so good. Game is favorite game. Did not pay. Hacking CD, but love game. And we're definitely not blind to the fact that it was a little impenetrable. And I gotta think the Russians sort of like love of self-abuse. Like they like difficulty.
Oh,
So
if
when
you've
you're
ever
a
played a Russian space game, yeah, basically.
Well, when you're a Siberian reindeer farmer and you have like nothing but angst, it's kind of like a...
To explain though, to answer your question, Softdisk Publishing were the ones that it got their start from. So they were actually moonlighting, working on Catacombs 3D and Commander Keen, and it eventually broke off and left, and that's actually how we ended up getting the Raven engine. So that's a whole nother story for a different game that we worked on. But Softdisk mainly did this e-magazine thing. They would send out little fun games on Commodore 64 floppy disks, and people paid subscriptions for this stuff. We were one of the few games that they actually sold through mail order. The Steam site has one of the original flyers for the game on the art page.
Because I'm a gaming addict. I'm going to admit it, and I spent a lot of time perusing magazines. I would go to EB and Babbage's all the time. I never saw this thing anywhere. I didn't see it in magazines. I didn't see it in stores. I completely missed it somehow. And this is my jam. This game is my freaking jam. And if I had known about it in the 90s, I would have played the ever-loving frack out of it. But I never knew about it. And when I finally found out about it in the mid-aughts, it was impossible to find. You couldn't find a copy anywhere. I couldn't find a physical copy. I couldn't find a digital copy. I've been looking for years. So the fact that you guys finally brought this out to the mainstream just tickles me. But I would love to hear the story about how you guys got involved in Ironseed. And then I would love to hear about how you brought this 25th anniversary edition about, if you wouldn't mind sharing those stories.
Sure. Do you want me to start, Rob, or do you want to go first?
Go ahead. I'll talk about the new one. You can talk about the start of the old one.
Yeah. So the original idea I got when I was bagging groceries at Kroger's before I started college, and I get a little crazy when it comes to world building. So I kept adding to this idea that I had. And so when I finally met Rob, I guess it was my sophomore year of college, our sophomore year, that we really started hanging
sophomore.
out. Yeah. I had drawn the logo with no way of making the game because I wasn't really, I wasn't a CS major, so I wasn't really writing code other than like obliquely for some of the engineering courses that we had. And so I kept talking. I was basically talking my friend Chris Cash's ear off, whose nickname, as it turns out, is Crispy Cash. His middle name literally starts with a P. So Crispy introduced me to Rob, and he was like, "This guy is like a hermit. All he does is write code all the time. Like you guys should totally be friends, and you need to stop bugging me with all these stupid ideas because I'm not going to write your game for you." And so Rob and I got together that year. And really, we're just noodling around. Like we weren't really. I don't think in the beginning there was no real intention of making a game. We just had a few like concepts that we were playing around with, and I'm not entirely sure what the inflection point was, but there was some point at which we kind of sat back after, the third or fourth 12-hour day in a row where we were just fooling around, and sat back and said, "This is a game. Like this is the thing. Like we need to finish this now." And that's kind of what the point at which it started getting a lot more serious and wasn't just us fooling around. But I mean, even at the end of it, it was still primarily just me and him in his parents' townhouse, working ridiculous hours to finish this thing.
Yeah, we really didn't know what we were doing in the beginning. Everything I was doing was self-taught. So much of the game is, I don't know, reinventing the wheel because I didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't have anyone to ask questions about. So we didn't even have a decent graphics editor. I had to write our own graphics editor that we called Finger Paint Pro. So a little shareware program, but we were doing pixel level editing and
literally like placing one pixel at a time was how it was.
Dear God.
Yeah. But this was back before a lot of the editors existed. I mean, doing graphics in general was just difficult at the time.
And we were too broke to pay for Photoshop. I think Photoshop existed at the time, but it was like, there was a week, I remember there was a week once we really got going over Christmas break that I didn't eat. Because I was like, I can get a pat job working for IBM or NASA, or I can make games. I'm going to make games.
Wow.
So what kind of system did you guys code the original on?
It was written on a 286 or a 386.
Okay, so it was PC. I didn't know if it was like a Commodore port or what.
No, the music is the same format as the Amiga mod files. which is kind of cool. But yeah, it was all PC. The original.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the original code was in Turbo Pascal 5.
Oh wow!
With some assembly language.
I've been there.
Some of it was assembly language, and most of it was 33,000 lines of Pascal.
You're making me miss Pascal. That was back when code was sane and we didn't have this object-oriented trash.
Yeah, there's no object-orientedness in this. The original, that is. I mean, we were trying to pack this thing under the 640K limit. I mean, we were running into problems all the time with that. So that was interesting. We were also running into a lot of CPU bottlenecks just to play the music. Probably 20% of the CPUs devoted to the music decryption and mixing.
Well, that deserves its own little footnote here in this story. So one thing that Rob and I were convinced of was we were like, look, if you strip the music out of Star Wars, let's be honest, like that movie is not very good without the music. But somehow magically with that music, it transcends itself. Like it becomes this amazing thing because it's an amazing piece of art. But without the music, it's really not very good. And so we thought, okay, we know that because of our sense, like our sort of like design sensibilities, we're making something that's fun for us. It's going to be really difficult to get into. But what we can do is we can try to find the absolute best music to make this to make this a different kind of experience. And so we originally reached out to Purple Motion. So we drew inspiration from the mod scene because it was so much. And when I say mod, I don't mean like game mods. I mean like way back in the day, there was this demo scene where they would, since you didn't have graphics cards, you guys probably remember this. They would create these weird little, mostly in assembly language written programs to just max out, like graphically and sound wise, everything you could get out of these crap computers, because everything at that time was really, compared to what we have now, crap.
Yeah. Have you continued to follow the demo scene?
I was about to say there's
no.
still some stuff out there. Yeah.
Oh yeah. If you go look, because they have I think it's in Germany every year. They have like a big demo convention, and stuff that I saw last year was just mind blowing. I mean, they had, what was it, like in 80K, they had like a universe generator, and it made like stuff that was like living wallpaper that was super cinematic. And I'm like, you did what in 80K?
That's amazing. So we saw stuff like that, and we were like, even if we could just have like a tiny grain of that and sprinkle that on this, it would be amazing. And so the premier demo music guy at the time was this guy, Purple Motion in Scandinavia, I think. And so we reached out to him, and we were like, there's probably no way we can get your attention on this, but you've already created a whole bunch of tracks. Like, would you be interested in us licensing maybe some of your music for our game? And he was like, no, my stuff's tied up in licensing, blah, blah, blah. Or like, I'm not interested. But he was very nice about it. He was like, there's some guys on the East Coast that probably aren't that far from you, that you should reach out to. There's this one guy in particular, Andy Siga. He goes by Necros in the scene. You should reach out to him. He might be able to help you out. And so we emailed him, and he was the same age we were, like, snot-nosed kid, freshman in college or sophomore at this point in college. And so when we reached out to him, we're like, from one poor person to another, like, what would it take to license? You've already written all these tracks. We're not even asking you to write new tracks. We'll just license 10 tracks that they're just lying on the shelf. Would you be cool with that? And we'll, TBD what we'll pay you for it, but would something like that work? And he was like, sure, absolutely. Yes. And so that happened. That was a huge coup. Andy went on to write a bunch of the music for the original Unreal.
Oh, wow.
So if you're wondering why the music in this game is so good, it's because we had that guy. It was
it's fantastic.
The Williams of his time, right? Like, he was one of the most amazing musicians. And remains, an incredible musician. But for the time, like, it was like nobody was doing the kind of stuff that him and Purple Motion and maybe like two other people on the planet were doing with trackers. So we got him on board, but we needed the mixing software. And and in a format we could use, right? So there was like, I think the Pro Tracker or whatever it was that was out at the time. I think it was maybe in a different language. There was some reason why we couldn't use whatever was just out there. Might have been a licensing reason, but we found a dude, again, very similar situation to us, college kid, in Chile, I believe it was, right, Rob?
I think it was called Otto Kranz was his name.
Yeah.
The DMP player.
Yeah. So we reached out to him and we were like, hey, your mixer is amazing. There's nothing else like it. Can we, from one broke college student to another, can we license this from you? And he was like, yeah, sure. I'll put a mountain of time into this thing though. So like, can you afford a $500 license? And we're like, yes, like whatever it takes to get this, as long as it's reasonable. And we exchanged emails. I don't even know how we paid him. Did we send him a check to Chile? We got him paid somehow. I don't remember how, but we got him paid. And so now we're sitting on this license, perpetual use for whatever titles we had. And so now we've got some of the best music in the world, one of the best music trackers in the world. And it allowed us to have, if you had the, what was the name of that graphics card, Rob?
The Gravis.
Gravis.
The Gravis,
if you had a Gravis,
ultrasound.
Yeah, if you had one, it would mix
right.
to CD. It was CD quality. It would mix it at CD quality. And we had over an hour of CD quality music that fit on 2 floppy disks.
It was 5 meg for the audio, uncompressed,
and everything else was procedurally generated except for the log entries and the aliens. So that was another thing that we kind of geeked out on, was planet generation. Like everything in the game was procedurally generated in that way. Like all the stats, the planets, even the names of them too. I think. Just like we were like, how much can we like mash this down and make this entire thing build itself? And so, it might not have been the best game in terms of gameplay, but there were so many little elements like that to it that, to this day, I'm incredibly proud of what we created, even though it's, bizarre and sometimes impossible to play. So to finish that story, the punchline to that is that it might have been right after we released it. We got a cease and desist letter from Epic Mega Games.
What?
And they said, we have a license. We have the global use license from Autocrons, and you have to immediately stop distributing your game, and you owe us $50,000.
Oh,
we kind of peed our pants. Yeah. So we're like, oh my God, we got to find this license from Autocrons or we're effed. And this was before any kind of like regular backup of emails. Like we had to find like a computer hard drive that was at the bottom of a closet. Because at this point it had been like 2 or 3 years since we first talked to Otto. And we didn't know if we had the email anywhere. So we thought our lives were over. But thank God we found it. Not, like we're like 19, 20, 21, whatever. Really didn't know if having the email was gonna dig us out of this hole. Sent it, nicely worded letter, like, please don't kill us. But we have a pre-existing license with the original author. It's in perpetuity. $500. See.
Yeah. We had a similar issue with EA too, with one of the tracks, the Dimencio track. I believe it was being used by Fallout or one of those games.
Fallout Resistance, I think it was. It was an isometric game. They were like, you can't use this track because it's in our game, and we're like, it was released in our game first, then we have the license to it. So back off.
Wow.
If you'd have waited till now to sue them, then you'd say, okay, I'll do it for 1% of your company.
Yeah.
So there was a little confusion about the final track list. So it's somewhat understandable.
So what happened when the game was finally released? Because like I said, I sadly didn't see it anywhere. So what happened?
We actually did reasonably well. I still can't believe how many copies we sold.
Wow.
We got 10%, which so 10% of the profit, which in retrospect we got robbed. But we made $30,000. I mean, the game netted, or not netted, but total revenue was like over $250,000.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah. As weird as it is, people liked it.
I think because there were fewer games and fewer gamers, we had a higher tolerance for the weird back then. Because we didn't have as many games to play, so we played what we had. We played what y'all gave us. Whether it was
I don't think there was anything quite like what we were putting out there, because we weren't trying to be a standard 4X game. We weren't really trying to be an RPG. We were just like, we've got some ideas. We're going to put them together. See what happens.
This definitely goes more. This definitely goes more into the Starflight vein of space adventure / exploration. I think.
I was going to say there's that funny meme that's out there that's like, I thought you said this game was easy, and it's just like, well, yeah, I was raised on Mega Man, so I mean.
So the game did sell well, which I'm very happy to hear. I'm just shocked that I never found out about it. I'm sad. I'm very sad that I never found out about it back in the day. I would have, again, played the heck out of this. So fast forward to basically this decade. When did you guys decide to make a 25th anniversary edition? How'd that come about?
This is like the third time we've tried to remake this thing with various engines and attempts, and this was the first one that made it the furthest. I had been working at a little startup company trying to do some mobile games on Unity, so I was like, I'll try using Unity and see if I can't make some kind of Ironseed-like thing out of this thing. So that's basically how I got started on it.
And I think another reason why we were able to stick the landing on this one, whereas the others were more challenged, was because in every attempt prior, the scope was always massive. Like, we were like, okay, there were all these things we really want to do the first time. Like, let's do all of them. And so we would just get started, and it would just be like, oh, terror, because we were trying to do like so much stuff. Whereas what we should have done was what we've done here, which is start with a basic game loop, make it playable. Oh, now I remember why we made this game, is because we wanted to play this game. So now we're playing it. Okay, now we're finishing it. So I feel like much more of that was involved this go round than there was on previous.
Yeah, this time I also had a better approach, probably more mature, 25 years later. I actually pulled up the original source code and was converting the original logic directly. I wasn't doing any sort of like backwards reverse engineering or whatever. I was going at the original source and converting it from Pascal to C#. So that kind of kept me on track, so I wouldn't start going a little nuts. And even now I keep reining myself back, saying, nope, this is a classic rewrite. I'm not going to change the original. I did end up doing some cosmetic stuff. The planet generation was just so awful. I had to do something about that. No one would have played it if you had seen the original planets. not with the Unity engine.
But that thread does lead into another interesting part of the conversation, which is when you would run into those things, we would make a note. It's like, okay, well, if we create a new game, this is what we'll do. This will be another thing that we add to it. So trying to look at it as trying to come up with a list of iterations as opposed to, completely starting from scratch. And there's definitely enough momentum where I think the plan now, and correct me if I get this wrong, Rob, but there's another game that you're working on right now that's kind of been in the hopper for a while that you've kind of wanted to. That was actually the game I think you wanted to do when you and I met. So you're basically finishing up something really very similar to that, which is essentially a sort of a new take on, what's the name of that game? Omega Tank or something?
Omega, yeah.
Oh, wow, yeah, Omega.
Yeah.
Sure. That was the, was that the Origin game? Where you could
program tanks.
Yeah, you program tanks. Yeah, that's what I was, yeah, that was a
sort
crazy.
Of a Space Wars, Core Wars kind of game, I guess.
Yeah, I remember that game back in the day. I did not fare well with it because I'm not much of a programmer. and I bounced off it pretty heavily.
I'm thinking about putting it on the back burner for a while though, because I don't think there's a very large market for a game like that, and it seems like there's a lot of momentum right now in Ironseed. A lot of discussions on the message boards, and it seems like there's a lot of interest in doing a requel, the reboot sequel.
Well, I'll be honest. Seeing your game do well on Steam gives me hope, because I don't know if you guys see the stream, but I stream a lot of Starfleet 2, Krellin Commander, and he's working on that and planning to release it on Steam within the next year. And seeing your game do well gives me hope for that one. That's just another thing.
Well, and so I feel like where I feel like this new thing would land would probably be somewhere between Starflight and Sunless Seas, because we really didn't do enough justice with the logs, and I've really kind of hit my stride with writing. I haven't run a D&D campaign in 30 years, and the guy down my street was after 6 or 7 of us on this block, trying to get us to play D&D for like a year and a half. And he's actually, he's the late night rock DJ for WMMR. Marcus in the Darkest. Yeah, he's like, guys, we got to play D&D. And I'm like, dude, we all have side hustles and kids. Like, what are you talking about? This is ridiculous.
Wow, that's a memory. That's a
yeah. And so he's
not heard in a long time.
He's our half orc. And so I've been writing for that because he hadn't lined up a DM for us, and I was like, damn it, Mark, like you didn't. Oh, fine, all right, I'll write for this one, but I'm not doing more than one. And they enjoy themselves, and now I can't stop. So I'm writing. I think I'm up to like 80,000 words now. There's like 28,000 words. It's like 80 or 90 pages of campaign material that we may end up mixing down to some kind of releasable module. But the point is, I've been so into that. I'm like, it would be amazing if we just like dumped a Sunless Seas amount of like log entries into a more playable, humane version of Ironseed. I think, like, I would love to play that game. And I think other people would too.
Now, speaking of humane, I do want to talk about the UI for this game now, because it's a fascinating thing that I've seen few other games do. Because like with Starflight, you had your captain and you had your engineer, and it was a very simple menu system, very like almost too simple. Here you have a rotating cube, which is amazing, but it's where did that? I want to talk about the cube. Where did the concept for the cube come from? Because the first time I saw the cube, I was like, "What is this? This is." I went at the same time. I went, 1, what is this? And 2, this is so 1994, right here. So I would like to know more about how you came about this cube, because it's honestly pretty great. Once I started playing, I'm like, oh, this isn't so bad. But when I first saw it, I was like, So talk to me about the cube.
Do you want to take this one, Rob?
No, go ahead.
Yeah,
all right.
Is the cube gleamable in a Christian Slater kind of way?
Is it what?
It was a 90s movie, Gleaming the Cube, with Christian Slater.
Lord.
Okay. I thought it was a pump up the volume. I thought it was a pump up the volume reference, but go ahead.
Yeah. That's. I was grasping in that direction. So we felt like there needed to be some kind of, like, anywhere we could, we were trying to throw in a little bit of 3D-ness, because again, a lot of this was just like we would get to noodling around with something and we're like, yeah, just stick that in. So it's like a little kid who's never cooked before is like, I like cheeseburgers, put a cheeseburger in. I like these shoes, I'm gonna put these shoes in the pot. And the person that's sitting next to you is like, what are you doing? That's not how you make food. And you're like, I like it. And so the cube kind of came out of that. We were just fooling around and we're like, oh, you could, because I was like, what kind of 3D stuff can you do in here? And he's like, well, we're not really, we don't really have that ability now. We don't have, at the time there were no cars to do, dedicated cars to do that. So anything you would attempt to do like that would be slow and gross. And so Rob was like, oh, but what I could do is I can create a cube if I just use this scaling algorithm where I essentially just strip lines out of it and then add the other lines into the other side. I can fake it and make it look like it's rotating, even though we're not rotating anything. We're just like adding some stuff and subtracting some stuff. And I was like, that's brilliant. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, exactly. And so when we first saw it rotate, we're like, that's in. So it was definitely a case of like, shoe stew of like, let's put the things in. So the cube was one of those things.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny. I don't really know how people feel about the cube nowadays because I'm seriously considering removing it in the next one, just because it is so clunky to use for people nowadays. I don't know. That's still up in the air.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like a tic-tac-toe grid of icons, right? And it's just animated to spin. So I think the spinning part's kind of cool.
I do love that. I kind of do love that.
I do. Here's my questions about some of the UI stuff, and I do appreciate the retro aesthetic in the 90s, like, because it's clearly you guys were trying to keep a lot of that in there. My question though about this is it feels like half of the UI is in high definition and then the other half of it doesn't.
Right. That's because we're using the original art at 320 by 200. I don't know if you've seen some of the new changes recently, but I did add some options to do a higher res XBRZ filter on them, on the graphics. Oh. So it looks a little bit better. But yeah, there's the newer Unity elements, and then there's the original elements that are just scaled up. Yeah, so it's all original art from the original game, except for those 3D elements like the planets.
We're sorry, it's an ugly baby. We're very sorry, it's an ugly baby.
Yes,
that explains a lot, actually.
Well, I saw where there's an option you can go in and you check original graphics, and it turns the filter off, basically, which honestly I preferred. I don't mind a little pixelization, but the filter actually made things tougher to read for me.
I want one of those for like Facebook and Instagram. Can I just turn off people's filters? Can I just see reality for like 5 minutes?
You go on Instagram and you actually see reality. I don't think you'll go back a second time.
It's like a horror show, like seeing your mom without her makeup.
It's like filter free for Tinder. Oh God, no!
Kill it now.
So getting back to the UI, it's kind of interesting because again, this is a case where I don't really know what I'm doing, self-taught. So I did it the way I could figure it out, right? And so the game actually uses a lot of UI panels for all the 2D flat images. They're not 3D planes or anything. They're all UI from Unity's point of view. And then there's layers of that with 3D elements. So it's kind of interesting with the way it's designed. Like there's a camera that's viewing the 3D scene, but then there's a UI panel overlaid on top of that with the main screen, around the graphics. But then on top of that is a 3D cube. And then on top of that are these little virtual buttons that highlight when you hover over them. So that you're not actually clicking on the cube, you're clicking on invisible buttons above the cube. So it's all these different layers. So you probably do see some of that weirdness from the conversion.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I like what you got going on, and there was just one of those things where I'm just like, man, it feels like, I don't know. It was just interesting. I do like what you have going on though, but I'm glad to know that there's that filter because I haven't been into the options yet, and I'll have to check that out. But I do like the fact that I can hover over stuff and see what it actually is. Because when I was doing the scanning stuff at first, I was like, I have no idea what these things are on the left. Until I hovered over them, I was like, oh, okay.
I'm considering adding some tutorials and more tooltips and things to make it a little easier.
That would probably be a big help for a lot of people. Probably.
Yeah.
But once I started getting into it, once I started figuring it out, trial by error, which is very 90s also, I was actually getting into it. So I do like what's going on in this game.
The exploration stuff is really fantastic. very reminiscent of Starflight. Top of class type stuff. Really love the probing.
That's where the Tretz came into play. But it was trying to figure this out. What am I doing? What does that mean?
That's actually part of the design. The design is sort of you figure it out, and I know that's it's harsh. It's the harsh reality of the game, but there's so much going on in those screens that most users don't figure it out until they have that aha moment. That like, what are these lights blinking? Wait a sec, those lights are blinking in a certain pattern. What does that mean? For example, if you go to the crew status screen, the crew member's level is in binary for some of the little blinky lights. So there's lots of little bits of information if you look hard enough for it.
Interesting.
Those little sine waves mean something, but figuring out what they mean is part of the game.
Now, I do want to talk about the crew stuff, because that's another almost game in and of itself. Now, the crew aren't actually, if I'm remembering reading the manual correctly, they're not actually like humans. They're like tubs of gelatinous goop that hold people's personalities.
Yeah, here's how biosynth works. So the idea is that simply recording, basically, scanning a brain and storing that digitally produces a simulacrum, which is more like an automaton than a human. Like there's like intuition and things like that are lost in translation. So the people who came up with this technology were like, okay, we need an organic matrix in parallel with this other part, the synthetic part, in parallel with the synthetic part, in order to sort of hydrate the intuitive part of human consciousness. And so thus was born biosynth. And so you have this like weird organic crap that can handle, the ridiculous G's of accelerating to near light speed. And that was the other thing. We haven't talked about that yet, but we should touch on that at some point, about how everything happens at relativistic speeds, as opposed, like, unlike every other game that existed at the time, and still probably to this day, there's some kind of hyperspace conceit or something like that. Whereas with Ironseed, the idea was, no, there's like, you don't get to do that. That's not a thing that exists. So to move between worlds, the only way to do it is to do it as a synthetic, memory of a memory.
Because it would make it would squish the human bodies into pudding, basically.
Well, and you wouldn't like the number of years. Like, if you look at the readout of the number of years, a whole game can take like 50,000 years. So when you're interacting with species, you're interacting with like various representatives of the species. So only the longest lived, there's like 5 or 6 races that live long enough for you to interact consistently with, and all the other ones flit in and out. So they'll be like, oh, I'm at this planet. They're level 4. Great. Okay. We're going to interact with them like, we would humans here on Earth. They have all this great technology. Awesome. You leave and you come back, and it's 500 years later, and they're ash, and they're all gone. And all that's left are like burned out cities.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that could happen. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the planets can all evolve on their own from different states. There's a lot of physics and chemistry mixed in this game. We tried to base it on reality as much as possible.
Right, but with the crew management stuff, there's a thing that they can go insane. And
yes.
Apparently you've dialed that down for this version, which I am very grateful of, because I have one crew member who's going insane, and I can't make any, what are they called, mind enhancers to stabilize them. So she just keeps sending gobbledygook my way, and I'm like, oh god, I can't kill her, and she's my psychometrist or psychologist or whatever the hell.
Oh, so that's the worst.
Yeah,
well, she's basically supposed to fix these things.
Yeah,
and now she's gone.
Yeah, she's like the ship's counselor. She's like if Deanna Troi was going crazy. So that's fun. But apparently for the original, apparently in the original, insanity was much more common in the original.
Yeah.
Dear Lord.
Yeah, the skill checks were brutal. That's a whole game, sub game in and of itself, managing your crew, encoding, decoding, constantly adjusting them in the psychometry. Yeah, again, that's another factor that needs to be reworked in any sort of sequel. That I want more of those stats to have more meaning. And I wanted it to feel a little bit more like the way Sunless Sea's fear meters go up, something along those lines. Yeah. It's more like an encode integrity, and as you do too much, stress too much, your integrity goes down, and you need to recharge that.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Because I was like, why is researching them making them go crazy? But you're asking them to do a lot of work, which lessens their integrity.
Right.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Okay.
Also thinking that not because we're trying to copy Sunless Seas. As I was playing Sunless Seas, I just kept seeing all these parallels.
Oh God, yeah,
Ironseed.
no, I believe it because I've only played Sunless Skies, but it's the same basic concept. You're flittering around this unknown wasteland, and your crew is going more and more loony because we haven't been back to civilization in weeks.
Right. Whereas in the case of Ironseed, it's you're between stars, like the idea of being in the vastness of space with nothing around you for years at a time. And yeah, your encodes. Degrade.
Just you saying those words and me trying to have that concept for just a nanosecond just made me
it's terrifying.
It kind of is. Just to think about the nothing in between. Oh, okay. That's a nightmare right there. That's great.
It's like extreme sensory deprivation.
Oof. Yeah, that sounds... Okay. Anyway, so yeah, I've the coding and encoding, I didn't really pay much attention to until this one crew member started losing her marbles, and I'm like, oh, okay, I should stop them researching now, so they don't all lose their marbles. But that's how you level them up and make them more effective, is you have to do the research.
Well, that makes sense now that I'm starting to realize that. Now that you're saying this, now I've realized why my one crew member was going mental. I was like, why are you losing your stuff? And
I think you discovered something I didn't notice. In the beginning of the game, he couldn't build anything in the construction screen. Do you have to have your crew research stuff in order for stuff to show up?
Start mining stuff or something.
You have to level up. You have to level your characters. So the highest level shields and weapons, all their crew members have to be at level 20.
So this is what here's my first run of playing this, which is the breakdown is this. I had 4 planets. I started figuring out how all the scanning and all that stuff worked. I was like, cool, I'm getting into this. I'm digging it. I like what's going on. And then one of my probes was destroyed, and I was like, well, that sucks. All right, well, I guess I'm down to 1 probe until I can figure out how to make more of these probes. And so I finish doing what I'm doing, and I get to the last planet, and then halfway through scanning, the other probe dies, and I'm like, crap, well, I can't finish scanning this thing. I gotta start figuring out how to make more probes. And then I was talking to Brian. I'm like, Brian, how do I make stuff? I can't figure out how to make stuff. And he's like, well, it's in the thing. And I was like, well, there's nothing in my list. And so I start having all of my guys start researching stuff, and I just start flying around the system to all the planets just to kind of get the research bars to go up or whatever. And then I realized I had to be mining stuff. Well, apparently I wasn't mining properly, so I didn't get enough. And then I was like, well, because I'm learning this. And so I'm like, well, maybe I just need to go to another system. Maybe there's materials in another system. So I fly to another system. I can't mine anything because I can't scan any of the planets.
That's
so I'm like, well, maybe
that's when you restart.
And I was like, well, maybe I just need to go back. And I can't go back because I'm out of fuel. So I'm just like, this game.
Yep. Yep, that sounds about right.
But
I'm always fascinated to see other players, how they play the game. Because, as a developer, you know all the tricks. You know everything you need to do. And to me, it's just like, click, click, okay, I'm done. It's like no big deal. But for other people who don't know those tricks, it might as well be a big black box, right?
Well, and now we're back to talking about 90s games, because that's
right.
That's 90s games.
Oh, that's 90s games.
Once I realized what was going on, I'm like, okay, all right, let's try this again. And so I'm looking forward to really continuing to dive into this, because I really like what you guys
do. It is so fun to do the exploring. Now, I did want to ask you about the combat, because that seems like a completely separate game that I have no idea what the frack I'm doing. So please give us some tips on how to deal with combat, because the one time I tried to do combat effectively, I built a shield. So I had a shield, but apparently it was using too much power, so I couldn't shoot my weapons. But I didn't know that until I was running away from everybody, because I'm like, I'm not hitting anybody. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just gonna run away. I was gonna run away and leave. And then next thing I know, I turned the shields all the way down. It's like, oh, that's where all that power was going. That makes more sense now.
Again, this is one of those things that you have to look at all the little details. For example, if you watch the enemies as they come in, they start with pretty high shields, and they'll drop their shields on their own. And as they get close to you, they'll start raising their shields up if they get within a certain range, like I think under 300 kilokilometers. They'll start raising their shields. If they raise their shields, they are really tough to get through if you don't have the right weapons. So you need to nail them from a distance, let them drop their shields and nail them, or get close enough that they raise their shields and they run out of power. So there's all these little strategies and tricks, but you do have to, it's one of these games where you have to click around. Just like the conversations, you have to just type in stuff and just guess until you hit on something. So you can't be afraid to click.
So I have a thought about that and those two different things, because I feel like even though Ironseed can be punishing, I feel like if you can get into it, there's it's like if apples had bark on the outside. It's like if you can get past the outer part of it, like if you can get into it, it's delicious. With the exception of the conversations, I really feel like those could have been handled much better, because I don't feel like, whereas most of the other parts of the game, once you get into it, you're like, oh, cool. I still feel that way about that we didn't really deliver on how those worked.
I do appreciate how you just added a feature, I think it was a day or two ago, where if you turn the difficulty down to easy, you now get a list of things that you can type out when you run into someone. Because I had no idea. I'm typing out whole sentences like, who are you? Where am I? And nothing's happening. But apparently, it's a one-word thing.
Right.
So now you've added a list that you can use to further conversation when you run into people. Because you run into other people, other races quite often. You'll run into a planet that's covered in a big shield. It's like, oh, I should talk to them. What can I talk to them about? I have no idea.
I have a thought on this. Yeah. So since you have multiple AIs that are on the ship, and yet they're like human cloned minds, right? So what if they had conversations with each other and they had sort of like a voting amongst themselves, like, which was more like advice to you, like, well, what should we be doing? And, like, well, the science officer says, like, this is what we ought to do, or whatever. And it could be kind of like a tip system to the player. Although depending on what the personalities that you select of the different AIs are, the conversations will turn out differently. And when one of them starts going crazy, they will be, instead of having like a sanity meter, whenever they have those conversations, you just start watching for whenever one of them starts getting weird.
Or maybe they start giving you bad advice.
Yeah,
they could give you really bad advice.
Yeah, it's like, well, they're trying to kill us because, but subtly, not.
It's like Among Us, the Ironseed version.
Yeah, well, at that point, it becomes like werewolf, right? Like, who's the traitor?
I still think we need to get a community game of that going for us, by the way. Just throwing that out there. Just
sounds like sus.
Well, Among Us is the one to do it with, too.
I played the crew conversations.
Snabby.
Sorry, conversations are a game in and of themselves. Just trying to think of different things. And again, it's one of those aha moments. It's like, oh, yeah, I should ask my crew members about the icon. I just ran into the icon. Or I should talk to them about the Titarans. Or we just saw this Halifax maneuver. What is that? And you start asking them questions. And there's actually a ton of story inside the crew member conversations. It's not just, extra. I mean, there's a lot of backstory in there, and that's why I added that new feature, because I'm afraid of too many new players missing all that story.
Well, do they talk among themselves, or is it just like you can interrogate the AIs individually?
They're individual,
but we have talked about like again this wish list of what we might put into a second game. Having them talk to themselves was definitely on that list somewhere.
Yeah,
like in a perfect world, especially given the technology that's out there, like we definitely toyed with the idea of using a straight up chatbot and like training it on all the lore and then just having it talk to you, or like having them talk to each other in that way, but then slowly borking it, if talking about them going insane and then making it very clear, like they become incredibly paranoid. But then basically just using like chatbot software to do that. Like that would either be really cool or incredibly tedious and annoying. But
one of them wants to change its name to Showdown. That's a tipper.
Yeah.
Or if it asks you, would you like to play a game?
Oh no! Yeah. Oh no! Because I
open the pod bay doors, Hal.
That would be a bit of a whopper.
Because when you're having so much fun, like exploring these planets, which I love doing. I love probing these planets. I love probing them deeply. I love probing them.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. That's a different podcast.
Really, Commander?
No, I did not really realize how much conversation was actually in this game until like that patch came out and I saw the screenshot of all the options. I'm like, oh, there's even more there's a lot going on in this game. It's like,
oh, there is a lot. Yeah.
There's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot going on in this game, and they don't make. It's like it's kind of sad they don't make games like this anymore.
Yeah.
But you're talking about a sequel. You guys have mentioned that several times during this show. So is that already in the planning process?
Trying to do some UI design, trying to figure out how I want to do it. I think Jeremy's already thinking about story ideas, and we've been throwing around some different options, like, what if we did this? How can we change the game and make it better without losing the original retro feel? So we've been having a lot of discussions about that recently.
And also not because there's some great templates to borrow from, right? And so we want to be sensitive about drawing inspiration from those things and not falling into the trap of essentially copying somebody else's game. So it's all of these things at once, but we're definitely throwing some energy in that direction. Having folks like yourselves that are passionate about these particular types of games who could offer feedback on the game loop and other stuff as we're spinning something up would be immeasurably
this is the place
helpful.
To be. This is the place to be for that sort of thing. I swear to God. I mean, we talk about a lot of games, but it's the space games that bring us together ultimately, and a shared love of spaceships and space games. And this, I mean, when you talk about the pinnacles of the genre, you talk about Star Control, you talk about Star Control, you talk about Starflight, and I've not played enough of this to know yet, but I could see this being like one of the hallmarks of the genre, because it has pretty much everything that those other hallmarks have. It's got aliens, conversations, exploration, a story, combat, lots of toys to play with. And I gotta say, I love how you don't have to go out and like buy all the toys. Like if you learn how to build them and you get the right stuff, you can make your own toys. Which
a quick comment about that. So since everything is built with 3 other things, the most complex object in the game, the shield, the most powerful shield, is actually made of over 700 fundamental components.
Dear Lord. And that's like
layers.
yeah. And that's when you have, and that's when you level, and that's when you level up your guy. That's when you level up your guys to level 20, so they know how to build that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Mobius device is just insane. It's made up of so many other sub weapons, and just it's crazy.
But anyway, back to what you were saying. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go. No, you go. You go.
No, I was just going to say that's incredibly humbling to hear. I really, if I were capable of emotion, I would cry right now.
So you're from Pennsylvania. It's okay.
So as captain of the ship, are you also one of the AIs?
Yes.
Or what?
Except you don't get to go insane. Unless you already are, like Jeremy.
I was about to say, like, isn't
mutiny though?
Isn't that like
can there be a mutiny?
Plot twist? You are also an AI.
Yeah,
because the mutiny would be them trying to hack you.
Yeah, can there be a mutiny? Is that a possibility?
Not per se. I mean, they can definitely refuse to do work, but there's no actual mutiny. I mean, they'll basically fail their skill checks, like stop repairing the ship and things like that.
Oh God. So they'll stop scanning even? They'll stop they'll be like, no, I'm not scanning this planet.
Yeah, that actually isn't implemented. That's something that's kind of interesting about this game. There's a lot to the game, not to put too much as a spoiler on it, but it's not the way you think it is. You think that certain things and certain mechanics are working a certain way, and it's usually not. But we were so good at creating the illusion of the complexity that most people see more than that's really there. For example, we found that a lot of the early players would start getting log entries, and they would sort of be making their own story based on what order of log entries they received. They would fill in the blanks as players. So there's a lot more of sort of an imagination here, more showing rather than telling of the story, and people sort of fill in the blanks on their own.
It's just hints and suggestions, and then we kind of let people fill in. That was intentional, because we're just 2 dudes at Rob's place. Like, how can we make this seem much bigger than it is?
Well, it's a huge galaxy too. It's a huge game.
What is the arc of the game? Like the overall goal? Like, are you, because Earth's wrecked, you're these AIs in a ship, and you're gonna go do what? Like, find a place for humanity, or what?
Yeah. In a nutshell, I feel like that's in a similar way that I feel like the conversations, we let folks down to an extent with the conversations, because that could have been structured, more humanely. In the same way, I feel like the intro, it leaves a lot to be desired, because it I don't know. I feel like you can draw a lot of the wrong conclusions from what's actually happening. So I feel like it's more confusing than helpful. As I imagined it, and I still feel like the story falls short in terms of conveying what I had in my head. But in my head, you interact relatively soon after the beginning. You end up interacting with these nascent machine intelligences that left Earth with you, not in the same ship, but like from Earth during the diaspora. You interact with them, and then they draw the wrong conclusions from your interactions and become a menace. And so then you have to get all these species together to cooperate to essentially eliminate them. So from the beginning, the idea is you want to find some peaceful planet where you can put down stakes and hydrate, so to speak, humanity from being purely machine intelligences back into human bodies, with birthing factories and other things, basically becoming human again, like unextincting humanity. But you can't do that because you're being harried by these machine intelligences at every turn. So whether you're being attacked by just random species or the scavenger specifically, the idea is you have to like get everybody to play nice together so they can eliminate this threat. So you can, pitch a tent and have like a place to live.
That's a big deal, and it could take 50,000 years for that to all come together.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's damn.
Yeah, I felt like the story was too complex again for most modern players who don't want to deal with the pain of the 90s. So there are a number of spoiler story arc descriptions on the Steam page. If you get really stuck, that would be the place to go to.
That's good.
I just opened like with a mission statement because it's like I loaded up the game, I started a new game, and I picked the crew, and I couldn't figure out like why would I pick one versus the other. I'm not real sure, but I picked some, and then I was sort of like, okay, I scanned the planet, and then it was like, okay, I'm looking at the various maps, but I don't see a way to actually like move to a different place, and I don't know what else to do with this planet, so I'm kind of stuck. And at that point I was kind of looking for like a nudge, like, hey, you should be doing this because the goal is find this other planet, and this one ain't it. So
right. Oh, that's sort of what the second data buoy is for. The nearest planet you run into has a log entry with a bunch of other locations that are revealed, and then that kind of leads you on. You have to go to the sector codex or the sector map to see where you are and where you're going. But there's one of the interesting things about the UI is that there's lots of different displays and they interact with each other. Like you can select the travel direction and it shows you stars nearby and a line between the stars showing where you've come from and where you want to go. And you can also open the star logs. And as you select different things on one side, it's changing on the other side. So the displays sort of connect together, and you're supposed to have multiple displays up when you're doing some of these operations. Like clicking on a star is it doesn't give you any information. You have to have the star logs up to see what is that star, what's it called, where is it located, how far away is it. So there's both graphical information and textual information. Yes, it's complex for the new users.
It's like if I had understood how to reveal that information, I don't mind not having it spoon fed to me, and I love a good mystery. And if this turns out to be like some kind of like space mystery game thing, then cool, right? But yeah, it's just like a statement at the beginning. It's like, okay, in year whatever mankind was destroyed, you're this ship with these AIs, and your goal up until a minute ago was seek out this planet somewhere that you can reseed life on. But the current situation is you're in orbit here, and something's busted and you got to fix it or whatever to get out of this particular place, and then sandbox the rest, right? Something like that, because it just didn't really give me a direction of like I should be hunting for information in the UI or what. And I wasn't like whatever I was clicking, it wasn't coughing up the info.
Yeah, and like I said, had you left the system, you would have triggered a couple more logs, and that would have explained a lot more. So
but I definitely agree with you that it's not very clear, and that's if there was one thing I feel like we'd do better in a sequel or a requel or whatever you want to call it, it would be like there's going to be a profusion of log entries.
Yeah. Instead of 50, there'd be 500
kind
of a thing.
Yeah.
All right, I got questions. little tutorial session here for old Hunter. So let's say I'm orbiting a planet. Got this whole thing scanned down. I got like my little miner bot out there, and he's mined a whole bunch of stuff. How do I get that into my cargo hold?
Bot screen. There's another tab called cache, the planetary cache, and you can just pull it out of the cache. So the idea
the remove button is that?
Yeah, the remove button. You remove them out of the cache, and that puts it into your cargo hold. You're not the first one who's asked that question, but yeah, it's to add and remove items from the planetary cache. The idea was back in the old days that you would drop mine bots as you were traveling around, and when you returned, you would collect all the things that they produced.
Need some time to do it.
Yep.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time.
You're not meant to sit there and wait for them to. Right?
No, that's not the original design. I changed that to make it easier for new players again. Another one of those changes. But originally, it would take a full day of time to even get one item in the cache. So you would have to travel around. You don't want to just sit there and wait for a day to go by.
But again, a lot of this could be more easily revealed in log entries. Like I feel like that's not to keep like whacking myself with a fly swatter like bad toad, but we could have done better.
Well, and the cache can be used in other ways too. Like if your cargo gets full, you can dump a few items off and come back later. That was the general idea.
Okay.
More questions.
If you dropped off the miners, but there's a % chance that you come back in 100,000 years and find out that miner has turned into a robotic civilization that hates got abandoned.
That's a cool idea.
Is evolved. You want Skynet? This is how you get Skynet. I honestly am glad you've made it You've made the barrier to entry a little easier for new players because. Like I said, I think we had more patience back in the 90s than we do today. And,
things were definitely different back then. I was just about to mention that it's sort of
back in my day.
like the crew descriptions. In and of themselves, the crew at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which crew members you pick. You pick whichever one you feel like, because you can always mine enhance them and fix them. And most of them are going to go insane anyway. So it's just a matter of preference. But it's the same concept that back in the old days with RPG games, you could type in a biography for your character. It had no impact on gameplay, but it was that immersive factor. And there's a ton of that kind of stuff that we tried to put into this game, where there's stuff in there that has nothing more than immersion details. We were crazy detail oriented back then. Nowadays, I feel like new games, they strip all that stuff out. If it doesn't directly affect gameplay, if it doesn't directly affect story, they throw it away.
It's not directly monetizable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can have backstory, but you have to download it, and it costs an extra $5 per character.
Yeah.
So in this day and age, your miner bots would bring up loot boxes that you would have.
Yay! I can build a third probot now. Look at that!
Yay! Oh,
yeah. The funny thing is, if you know what you're doing playing the game is actually not that hard. The hard part is figuring out what you're supposed to do.
Yeah,
because I can go through and drop my mine bots and have decent weapons before I even leave the first planet, because I know what I'm doing. But I get that it's really hard for new players. And like I said, that's part of the game. Figuring out how to play it is part of it. I think that's a quality that's lost in a lot of these new games. Most games you can drop in and say, oh, I kind of get this, and start clicking around. But if you take someone who doesn't play, like your wife or your mother or something, and say, here, sit down and play this game, they're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And that's...
I would like to say in Rob's defense that he is not actually misogynistic. He chose poorly.
No, I'm just saying that someone who's not a gamer, that I need balance in my life. So I married a non-gamer intentionally.
I gotcha. I know where you're coming from.
Yeah. But a non-gamer would be like, what is this? Even throwing something as simple as Mario in there, they're like, which direction am I supposed to go in? How do I jump? Yep. What do you mean hit this button? They don't know what to do. So it's interesting to see how games have evolved in the last 25 years, or not evolved in some cases, maybe even de-evolved.
Well, I think
that's like the Mario Brothers movie, de-evolve.
I think one reason is that there are a lot more games now. So we have less time to dedicate to one particular game. And so those games today, they have to get you right out of the gate. It's not I can't spend 10 hours learning this because there are 10 other games I could be playing in 10 hours.
Yeah. So I would say that that there are plenty of games where you still have to. There's still that learning curve, but there's signposts all along the way.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree.
So there's like not to keep going back to that, but things like Sunless Sea, whether it's that or not. There's all kinds of crap to learn, but you don't start out having to know it all. Right. And I think that's really the difference here. If I were to tweak anything going into the next one, it's just have a lot to say, and just kind of guide them along. It doesn't even have to be a tutorial, but it has to be approachable.
The other thing on Sunless Sea, right, is like Sunless Sea is like a small piece of a much bigger thing, because if you go on the web and there's like Sunken London or whatever it's called, it's like their web, Fallen London, which is like their website story version. Then it's like an entire universe in a website. That's all these stories out into like.
Yeah, I was trying to convince when we were casting about for what would we do next? Would we do an Ironseed thing? If you've got time, what would we do? And I was trying to convince him to do that, to do something like that, with basically to turn this campaign, this D&D, to circle back to that, this D&D campaign that I'm working on, to like essentially chop it up to a bunch of choose your own adventures and basically bolt it together like that. Because if I'm writing it anyway,
Yeah.
But
that sounds fun.
Thinking about how games have changed that way. If you look at things like Warcraft, you've got these big giant quest symbols above people's heads, and you know exactly who to run up to and click on. Whereas you play a game like EverQuest, you got to go talk to them and ask the right keywords to trigger the quest, and you have to know exactly what items to hand them.
Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody.
It's different. It's very different.
I need this guy to give me this fetch quest, and then I gotta go fetch these 5 chickens. That's what I gotta do.
But people don't even read the quests in Warcraft, though. They don't even bother. They're just like, go collect these things. I don't care why. Just go collect them.
Warcraft started out like that.
Yes.
And then people like, this isn't dumb enough. Let's make UI mods where we put like a giant arrow on the screen that points at, it's like, I don't even have to figure out where this is. So at that point, it becomes just a going through the motions kind of thing, right? Like I was talking the other day, it was like my rant of the day, because I get one a day, was like old school MMOs where you actually had to have a party so you would socialize with people. And then it's like, I have chosen to be... I'm like the healer, right? But I can't be a healer unless I have other people to heal, and they can't be in the dungeon unless they got a healer. So we need each other, and but all that content is made for solo play now. So you kind of have lost that whole element, and it's also the part about figuring out how to play the game. I feel like, for every game that you play, you don't have to figure out anything, because you go to the wiki and somebody will have written out for you. Like, so there's no mystery anymore, because and like YouTube has made that even weirder, because it's like the game came out this morning, and then in the afternoon I can go on YouTube and somebody has like, here's all the cutscenes from the game, just watch the game.
Game the movie or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's at that point, it's just like, okay, you can't have like a mystery unless you procedurally generate it or something. So it's different for every person based on what they do, right? And or like what you were saying about, it's not necessarily that the content changes, but the order it's handed to you changes, and therefore you write a different head fiction for it.
Right. My wife actually had a good observation the other day about these games that we're working on, which is, we're intellectuals, Jeremy and I, and so we write intellectual games. I mean, that's the truth of it. We write hard games because we want challenges. And I don't know how to explain that. It's probably a really bad way to explain it. But
no, I totally get it. Yeah.
It doesn't appeal to the mass market. It doesn't appeal to people that have no attention span. It appeals to people who like to solve puzzles.
And so you like self-abuse.
Well, okay. Well, so let's say next game, you want to do a game that also has an abusive, weird, obtuse GUI on it, right? Because the fun of the game is figuring out what the hell do all these buttons do and why would I click them, right? So if you start with the assumption that, hey, this is a human ship, so it should come from human, like the things, human thought patterns, so things would make sense. Because like if you look at like the universal icons that we use for a bathroom or whatever, right, you can kind of go to every country and figure out what something is, if it's hieroglyphic style. But you get on an alien ship and you don't know what anything does. So maybe like stick the player on like, guess what, you just stole a Klingon ship. Like, good luck figuring out what all these buttons do. Bye.
What is Kapla?
I actually had this idea of creating the UI in sort of a multi-layer approach where most players don't need to go past the first layer. They go into their cargo, they see that they're full, okay, move on. But maybe you have this player that wants to min-max, that says, 20% of my cargo is taken up by components. I need to fix that. Or maybe I can dump a few of these items, or, I've got 2 minutes of this and I need to trade it. But for your average player who doesn't care, they just want to go explore, none of that's really that important. My cargo's either full or not full. That's all they care about. You know what I mean?
When you sent me that message earlier, was that today or yesterday? Probably this week. Yeah, I was just thinking about how you and I had talked about before, how we had our druthers. Like if money was no object and we could make whatever game we wanted to, making each one because we talked about how these different parts of the interface are kind of like mini games, and then if we had time, we really would have fully explored that. So like you've got somebody who's playing Ironseed and they just spend like hours in the cargo hold, and they're not doing anything else. They're just like rearranging stuff in the cargo hold.
Well, that's the way I was looking at it. Is like, what if cargo inventory was a mini game? Like probe scan is a mini game. What if you made every sort of operation some sort of mini game? It could be a really fun thing to play.
Cargo hold Tetris. You have these weird shaped boxes and you have to fit them.
I'd play the hell out of that.
Well, I was thinking more like, so it's a little bit that, but it's almost like Candy Crush, because if you built things with the stuff that was in there, then they would take up less space.
Oh yeah, so you craft things. You have to commit them though, but you craft things to compact them, pretty much. But then one thing, it's a thing. Yeah, no, that's cool. The other thought that I had is like if you did the Alien game, where it's like here's a weird interface on purpose. Procedurally generate the icons, or at minimum just move them around like they're not in the same order every game.
So like imagine a roguelike, but the interface is like that. It's like every game you play, the buttons are all over the place. They do different things.
Yeah, you have to escape. You have to escape within 5 minutes, and you have to learn the ship to be able to escape within 5 minutes. And if you don't, you die. You start again. Here's a new ship.
Well, it's like that bomb game, but inside out.
Well,
so like instead of like trying to defuse a bomb, you're like inside the bomb.
Well, there is a game called Deep Sixth, which is basically that idea.
Yeah,
you're on a ship. Yeah, you're on a pod, basically a mining pod, and the interface changes the necessary components you need to repair things or where they're placed within the ship, and the procedures change for all the repair facilities that you need to use. All of that changes from game to game. So because it's randomized in that way or procedurally generated in that way, you can't always predict what's going to happen next.
Yeah. I've been one thing I keep thinking about is what can I change that doesn't break the retro feel, that doesn't break the original? What is that quality that makes it appeal to certain kinds of people? Like some people like you guys get really into a game like this. Why do you do that when I've got like 10% of the users returning the game? It's like
shit.
What is that? Yeah, it's kind of crazy. 10% of the Steam users return it without playing.
I think without playing?
Well, they play less than 2 hours.
Like they open the thing up and they look at like the buttons and they're just like, oh God, what, like the experience that I had, right? Where it's just like, I have no idea what I'm or where I should go. And this game isn't really, it's not even pointing me in a direction at the beginning. I'm just around a planet and I got probes and I did that, but I don't know what else to do. And I can't find the button that lets me leave. Right. So at that point, oh shit, refund. Right. But if, going back to like Sunless Sea, right. So that's a game where it's like, okay, it's a boat, WSAD to steer the thing. And it makes sense. Like I can control the thing. So the challenge in the game is knowing like the limits of what I can do and what I should be doing, and then you discover like through dying multiple iterations, like, hey, this was a bad decision. Right. But on the surface level, in the first 5 minutes, the person can engage with it. So their bewilderment happens after the first 5 minutes, not before. So I think that's the deal. Is
I've
you got a
couple ideas to make it better. I've little tutorial dialogues, detailed tooltips versus regular tooltips, and things that you can kind of configure. So I can definitely improve the play a little bit. But this is the classic remake, and doing too much to it won't make it classic anymore. Some of these ideas I want to take on to the sequel.
And that's what I'm talking about is like in the sequel, if I had this to remake, right, and I didn't want to make it look like Sunless Sea, but I want to preserve the story stuff, because the story stuff, because you're saying, well, like we're game nerds, but like why do the intellectual people get stuck on a game like this, but a lot of people eject out? And it's like, well, I couldn't get to the intellectual engagement part or I would have been hooked, right? So it's kind of like you have to get me to that quick.
Right.
And I realized like, oh, hey, there's this is a game about like information, conversations, and puzzle solving. And there is a little bit of bewilderment about the interface, but the first couple of things that I needed to do, it kind of led me by the nose, right? It was like, okay, probe the planet, collect the resources, gas tank's full. Now we can go to the next star. And you're off. And then that's the only help you get. Like you figured out that loop. And it could be the AIs on board just advises you like, hey, did you forget what we're doing here? You need to probe and put an arrow, make the button flash or something to draw attention. But yeah, I mean, it's like you could fix this one a little bit with that. Right. Maybe like a couple of, I don't know, like an interaction with the player at the beginning from one of the AIs that just says, hey, by the way, this is what you need to do. Here's the button for that. Beep, beep. And the button blinks and get them out of the first system. Like here's how you fuel the ship up. And maybe there's like something that needs repaired and we get that from the planet, but you have to probe the planet and then we send the thing down and it'll just like by the nose drag you through that, and then it turns you loose as soon as you leave that first star. That was the tutorial system, and from there on it's School of Hard Knocks. I definitely need to make more tweaks, and that's why I finally said, you know what, I'm more interested in players playing through the game and seeing the story and enjoying it the way we meant it to be enjoyed, rather than making it too hard. So that's what I've talked about when I say, I've kind of, I don't want to say dumbed it down, but I made it a lot more approachable.
Which is good.
Like adding the keyword drop list.
Well, for me, just realizing the word remove was mean to remove it to your cargo. I'm cruising now. Like I'm mining all the things, making all the stuff. I'm having a blast.
And I wonder if 10% is like around average for returns. I wonder.
I honestly don't know. It's something kind of new. I've never seen it before because I didn't get any returns on itch.io, but Steam is kicking out a lot more than I expected. So I don't know.
Does itch.io have a return policy?
They do through PayPal and some other things. One guy I actually did was try to talk about it, but he had a lot of issues. He actually ran into some really nasty bugs in the beginning, and I had to do some pretty major overhauls to fix it. It's pretty stable at the moment. Not too many bug reports, so I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I didn't have any problems. I have to say it was for a port of a 26-year-old game. I have to say it's held up remarkably well.
and to answer the question, I believe as to why so many people, that 10% had refunded it compared to, say, the people in our community to glom onto it and then just hang on. It's because this particular niche, as a general rule, likes unpeeling the onion, so to speak.
That's a good point.
Right.
That's a good point. Yeah. That's a real good point.
I do have a thought about what you could do as
last thing, Jim. This is the last thing because we have to wrap it up. Last thing. Okay.
Hold on to this, right? Instead of modifying the game that's here, but you just kind of bolt a layer on. So if there was like a ship's library computer that you could go into that's sort of like a built-in wiki for the game where and it's like maybe even like a text input box, like, what do you want to search for? And I could like type in fuel and it would take me to the page for that. Right. And then it'd be like, where do I get fuel from? Idea. Oh yeah.
That's really cool, man.
You got to,
and then maybe it would add more. Maybe we'd add more entries as you continue to explore more. They wouldn't be accessible until you've
level up your crew.
Until you've actually accessed certain things, you wouldn't see the higher level.
Jim, that's actually a really solid idea. I dig it. That's a good thing to. It's a good thing to end on. My friends, we're going to wrap it up there. It's been an hour and a half. That's a good length. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk to us about this classic space adventure. It's an adventure. It's an exploration combat adventure that has recently hit Steam. Again, folks, if you're unaware, it's called Ironseed. It's the 25th anniversary edition that is on Steam right now. It is, if you have a hankering for classics like Starflight or Star Control 2, where you would fly around and explore and peel back the curtain of the universe a little bit at a time, this is the game for you. It's got a lot going for it. Don't be intimidated when you first start playing it, because you might bang your head against it for a little bit, but just start hitting buttons. And again, there are a lot of great guides and forum threads on the Steam forums. Like, that's where I got a lot of tips when I started playing. So definitely go to the Steam forums for guides and tips, because this game is complex. And while it is not mean, it's not the right word. It's nicer than the original version for players. So don't be intimidated to dive in. But yeah, gentlemen, thank you so much for talking to us today about this game.
Thanks for having us.
And forcing us on video. These guys put themselves on Discord video and like, okay, fine. So a couple of us have been on video. And it's been a very different experience doing this on video. Very different. So, folks, next week on the show, we're going to have an early morning show, 6 a.m. Pacific, because we're welcoming back the guys from Interstellar Rift. I think they're in Germany. I can't rightly remember off the top of my head right now. But
the one Tuesday I can't be here in the morning.
I'm sorry. But no, so that's going to be an early morning show, 6 a.m. Pacific, because, they're overseas. But that game is great. That's I think the closest thing we have found yet to Euro Truck Sim 2 in space. I think it's not quite that, but it's the closest thing we have found to it. And then, tomorrow on the stream, I don't know what I'm going to be streaming, but Thursday, what are we playing Thursday for our co-op thing? Is it Outward? Is that what we're playing?
That's what we had on the calendar. Outward.
Yeah, Outward. So that's what we'll be playing Thursday for our weekly LAN party. So as always, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Special thank you to those who go support us on Patreon and Twitch. You guys are the special best. I love you. And with that, we will bid you a good night. Have a wonderful day. Tomorrow, be safe, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time. Good night, everyone.